Hello and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be working on data table, and this one you're given a list of users and you want to build a users data table that displays the users in paginated format. So the users data table needs to needs to display the following columns, all these. Each of these represents a single user. So it looks like we already have some kind of table, but I guess it's not. We're missing something. Okay, so we should have pagination and we should have options for us. Let's take a look quickly. So it's essentially the same as this, except we want to have a paginated table, so we can select how many we want per page. So 5, 10, or 20, we can go with that. And then if we go to next, so previous, it shows you the page we're on, how many pages are total. So if there's 36, 5, there's 8 pages of 5. So you can just go to the next one, last page, and then so these should be disabled when you can't go anymore. And let's see what happens if we're on a page and we click on another thing. Okay, so if we change the number per page, we always just reset to page 1 and show this again. All right. So makes sense. Okay, so let's take a look what we got here. So we make a data table, and this data table has a heading. So typically a table has a head with the like the head values. So here they are here, ID name, age, occupation, and a body, and each user has the ID name, age, occupation with TDs. So what I'm thinking here, and this is pretty good to do, and you can add more features if you're making like a super reusable table, but essentially what we can do is we can break this down to 2 parts. Instead of having a data table here, we can just have this be a table. And then so that'll be this table, and then this bottom part will be another component that will call both. So we'll have a table, and then we'll have a data table that will figure out like what page on the table we need to show, pass that to table, and then also have this whole thing to change all those things. That way the table is easy. We can just pass in stuff there to display, and then we can have this guy. So let's go with that. So let's change the app to just show a regular table. Actually, the app should show a data table, but we also want to provide the data table. So you could have as many props as you want, but essentially we'll give our data table props of how many things we want to have per page. So in this case, we'll have a 5, 10, 20. So we'll pass like an options of 5, 10, 20. And you can add more props if you want. Like you can add headers and whatever in the name and all that, but not going to do any of that. You can just keep making it more and more customizable essentially. But it is good to have, like when you are building, and you could talk about this if you do like a front-end interview, like why you separate this out, because typically like every table isn't a data table. Like you might just have a regular table. So you want a generic table component typically, and then you want to have like a modified table that will do some stuff and call table to do that. All right, so we're not going to export default this guy. This won't be exported at all. And this won't take the entire users in map. It will take some specific list. So we'll call this list. We can give it the message, whatever. And like I said, you can make this more customizable. I'll just leave this. And now instead of users, we'll go list. Okay. So we're good now. So yeah, essentially this, we can even get rid of this, I guess, because the solution doesn't have this data table. So we can get rid of that guy. We won't have a header. We'll just show the table. All right. And then yeah, this has an error, but that's because we don't have the data table yet. So now we'll have the export default function data table. And now this is going to take a prop options. And we need to know what option we're on. Like, should we show 5 or whatever? So we'll just have a state of what option we're on. We'll default it to the first one of options. We're not going to check for like 0 options or any of that kind of stuff. You could if you want to, but we'll assume the options is valid. Okay, so we're going to say constant count, set count or something, and we'll initialize it to options at index, or in fact, no, this is fine. Options at index 0. And then when we modify it to something else, we'll change it to that. So this is our count. So initial count is 0. Now we also have to know what page we're on. Like here, we have to know like what page of the table we're on. So we have to do two things: the page and then this value. So those are the two we're going to be storing. So we'll go page and set page. And we'll just say we're on page 0. Okay. So now also for the pages, we actually have to know like how many pages are there given this count, right? So we can just calculate that. It doesn't need to be a state. We can use these two things essentially, or just the count to figure that out. So we can go total pages equals, so users is what we're importing here. So this is going to be users length over the count. So essentially if this is 36 and we have 5, we will get what, like 7 point something, and then we got to round this up because even if there's one item on a page, we still need a page. So we'll go math ceiling of that guy. Okay, and then what else do we need? Let's just not even have the toggle. Let's just make sure we're showing something. So let's just show a list with this. Maybe we could start there. So we can return a div, and let's just show our table in our div. So we're going to have the table in the div. And like I said, we need to give like what part of this users table are we showing? And we can just calculate that on the fly. So we can go table, what does this take? This takes list. So we can go list equals, so we can essentially do a slice of the users. And the slice is going to take what page we're on plus essentially the count. So like it's going to take the first part and the next part. So the first part, so if we're on page 0, we want to start at 0. If we're on page 1, like whatever page we're on, we need to figure out how many pages did we go through already times the count, and that's how many we're on. So essentially this is going to be this. So like if we're on page 1 and the count is 5, we want to start at element 5, at element at index 5, and so on. If we're on page 2 and the count is 5, we want to start element index 2. And then the upper bound of that will be this same thing plus the count, because that's how many we have per page. So now this table is gonna have like the right elements to look at. All right, now I guess we still have an error in the app, so let's take a look. Expected a string. Oh, right, so we need to export this. Actually, no, we did export it. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're somewhere now. So we're showing the first 5 items by default here. So because the count is 5, we're on page 0. So it's the first 5 items. So if we're on page like 1 to just the test, yeah, see this is the next 5 manually and so on. So we got the right thing here. Okay. So now the next thing we need is we actually need to build this guy. So first we need a select component, then we need 2 buttons, and then this. So the select component is going to have all of the options in the options, and then those will be tied to a state. So let's build that next. So we'll have a select component here. And we want to style this bottom thing so we can give it like a class name and then style it later. So maybe we'll call it like footer or something. We can't fit it in the table because it's separate. You could, if you did combine these, then you could put this in the T footer. But because this is separate, we won't have a footer. We'll just have it like a div that's called footer or something. Okay. So we'll call it footer. And then we'll have all of our items in the div. So yeah, the first thing we're going to want to have is this select component. So that's just going to be a select. And what are the options we're going to have and all that stuff. So essentially the options will be, we're going to map through our options here, and then we want to say select plus the number. So we could do that. So we can go options, map, opt, and then we want to go option, key. These are all going to be unique, so we can use that. Value will be that same thing. Then we want to close it. And then we want to print something here. So here we can just say, to a template literal, select and then the number in this thing, so opt. Okay, so we got select 5, select 10, select 20. Now we actually need to, once they pick one, we need to actually change the option we're on. And this is going to be the count, right? The count per page is going to depend on what they picked. So in the select, we're going to have an onChange. Yeah. And then we're going to go take an event. And then we are going to do two things. So we're going to set the page to 0, because remember in this example, whenever we change the number of items we had per page, we're always going to go back to page 1. So we're going to set page to 0. Now the next thing is we need to actually take this value and set it. And so in a select, this value is actually going to be a string. So we can even show this. So we can say like console log target value. All right. So let's take a look. So if we change, sweet 10, is it a string? Maybe it's not a string. Let's do type of. There we go. I'm pretty sure this should be a string, but let's find out. Yeah, so these are strings. So we need to actually change it into a integer. So we can go set count, take this value and turn it into an integer, and we don't have to worry about like invalid values, so we can use parseInt. I think you might want to figure out like what type of int parse you want to do if the integers are more complicated, but this is just going to be all positive numbers, so everything should be the same. Yeah, so parseInt e target value. And now let's test this. So if we go set 5 and then we go set 10, I guess we don't really have pages yet, so we won't know like what page we're on. So I guess that's the next part. So we're going to add two buttons, kind of like here, this previous and this next, and then the page. Let's go with the buttons first. Yeah, so let's go with the buttons first. And the buttons are going to be after the select. So button, previous, another button, next. So we need to also state when these buttons are disabled. So the previous button should be disabled when we're on page 0, because we can't go to anything else. So that's going to be the simplest. So go disabled, page 0. So if we're on page 0, we can't do anything. Next, it should be disabled when we're on the last page. So how do we calculate the last page? So here, we know how many pages we have, and these are 0 index. So we can go page equals total pages minus 1. And now we should at least be able to click. These don't do anything yet. Yeah. So then the next thing is we need to do onChange. So onChange will just give us the next page. So that's pretty easy. So here, onChange, we don't need to take an event. We just need to go set page to the previous page. So page minus 1 here. Sorry, this should be onClick, not onChange. Okay, so essentially when you click on previous, it'll go previous. When you click on next, it'll go next. Now we should have something working. So let's see. Okay, so there we go. Then we're going to get to the end. This is done. And if we change, we go back to page 1. Yeah, select 1, select 20. Next, 2 pages. Okay, so now we're missing one more thing, and that is what page we're on, which should be pretty easy because we just have that in state. So we can just say page 1 of total pages, essentially, or page whatever we're on of total pages. And we can add that between the buttons, I guess. Yeah, so we can essentially just write something here. Yeah, so page 1 of total pages, basically, or whatever. Yeah, we actually don't even need a div. We can just put text here. So yeah, so basically we can just say page. So this page is 0 index. We want it 1 index, so we'll add 1 of, and then this should be total pages. Okay. There we go. So we have basically all of it now. We can go through this. Okay, so now, small thing. So let's go back to this. So we can style it a little to make it look like this really quickly. So essentially, what do we got here? Yeah, basically, I'm not going to have this. I mean, we could if we wanted to. Yeah, but essentially I'll just have it be farther down and then display flex or whatever. So what did I call this? Footer. Okay, so we'll go footer. Go display flex. Blah, blah, blah. Have a flex gap, 10 pixels or whatever. Alright, and then we'll go like margin top or padding or whatever. Let's go margin top. Alright, so that's basically it now. Yeah, we could like add another div to be aligned, but I don't really care. Yeah, so that's, now we basically have everything we want here, right? So we have the right thing. And yeah, we can basically put whatever we want in this thing. So just to briefly talk about more customizability, if you were asked, like if you were like, you know, if you're making a table for like production app, you're probably going to want to have these table names as props. You're going to want to, yeah, so table names as props or column names as props, and then pass in the items from somewhere. And then also typically, you're not going to have such a small table, so you're not going to be loading this entire thing from like this. You might be loading like a page at a time or something like that. So every time you go to the next page, you might do another fetch of data or stuff like that. But yeah, you can definitely make this more customizable. But this thing is still actually really nice. That the fact that we're kind of separating our concerns. We want to have a regular table that can be used, and then we want to have a table with more functionality that can be used here. So hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.